on this episode of the WildFed podcast.
For some reason, I really enjoyed picking wild berries. It was something I could excel in.
I get the impression you know how to savor the sweetness in life, because a person who appreciates berries usually appreciates what's sweet about life.
Gooseberry pie, gooseberry dumplings, grape jelly, choke cherries. A good huckleberry patch is a family secret.
That is like one of the most underappreciated fruits on the landscape. To me, always makes the blueberry seem a little boring.
You have to come into a heck of a thimbleberry patch to have anything to do with them, and usually the best thing to do with them is eat them as you go.
It's got such a unique kind of strawberry, kiwi-ish kind of flavor.
Wanting to go out there and pick them, to get out and walk, to really appreciate the moment and all the beauty that's around you.
Episode 121 of the WildFed podcast, Reflections on Berry Picking with Bob Krumm, is brought to you by Surthrival. Surthrival's your source for nutritional products that fortify you against the health challenges of the modern world. Immune health, hormone upregulation, tissue regeneration and repair, and so much more. Right now, Surthrival's dual extracted reishi and chaga mushroom extracts are on sale. Dual extract means they're extracted in hot water for their immune modulating properties and alcohol for their adaptogenic properties. And they're packed in violet colored Miron glass to ensure potency that lasts for years. These organic and wild-crafted mushroom extracts are the very best on the market. And Surthrival's vitamin D3 K2 is on sale as well. Remember, vitamin D3, which is really more of a hormone than a vitamin, gets depleted as we go through winter. Now's a great time to get a bottle to keep your levels high until the spring and summer sun provides enough UV for us to make it ourselves. This is crucial to good immune health. Surthrival's D3 is derived from sheep's wool, and their K2, which helps the body put calcium where it belongs, is derived from Japanese natto, that sticky fermented soybean product you sometimes see at sushi restaurants. Both of these products are 15% off with the coupon code FORTIFY15. Head over to surthrival.com and use the coupon code FORTIFY15 to get 15% off vitamin D3 K2 and immune mushroom extracts. Surthrival. Why just survive when you can thrive? This episode's also brought to you by wildfoodwarehouse.com. Wild Food Warehouse carries hand-foraged wild rice, but they also carry a line of hand-harvested berry and plant powders from the northern latitudes of Finland. Their blueberry, lingonberry, and spruce tip powders are all sourced from the pristine lands north of the Arctic Circle, and they're packed in light-resistant, violet-colored Miron glass. They've just added a new 150-gram size that's 3 times more product at a significant savings. I love mixing a tablespoon of these powders into a liter of water and squeezing in some lemon to make a super refreshing, hydrating drink. The rich color and flavor of these powders lets you know you're getting megadosed with antioxidants and key nutrients like vitamin C. Head over to wildfoodwarehouse.com to check out their selection of Arctic-sourced fruit and superfood powders, and of course, for hand-foraged wild rice as well. The coupon code WildFed gets you 10% off your order at wildfoodwarehouse.com. Season 2 of our TV show WildFed is now on the air. That's right, 10 new episodes are airing on Outdoor Channel Monday nights at 7:30 East and again at 10:30 p.m. East. Our first episode aired this week featuring the 17-year periodical cicadas of Brood 10, aka Brood X. And of course, we're eating them along with black raspberries and mulberries. In fact, we're bringing all these ingredients to one of Kentucky's most celebrated chefs and enjoying an unforgettable meal. It's fine dining meets entomophagy. Next week, we're headed off to Texas to hunt hogs and harvest beauty berries on the Bamberger Ranch, a 5,500-acre landscape regeneration project that's been underway for 50 years. We connect with Chef Jesse Griffiths, author of The Hog Book, for some hog butchery, cookery, and great conversation. And we get to taste just how much better the fruits and meats of a restored landscape can be. Hey, if you don't have cable, and let's face it, most of us don't, you can watch the show live as it airs on friendlytv.com. That's spelled friendly without vowels, FRNDLY TV.com. You can get a free trial subscription if you just want to watch Monday's episode, and after that, it's just $6.99 a month. Here at WildFed, we're so proud to have our second season on the air, and we hope you'll tune in at Outdoor Channel or on friendlytv.com. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed podcast. a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. My guest today is Bob Krumm. He's the author of several wonderful books on berry foraging, books that span the Pacific Northwest to New England, and a fly fishing guide on the Bighorn River since the 1980s. In fact, still guiding clients today, Bob's now the eldest guide on the river. It's quite a distinction. I love this conversation because, if I'm honest, Bob's got qualities that I just really want to cultivate in this lifetime. He's so kind and good-hearted, and his outlook on life is beautifully positive. In these ways, he reminds me of one of my other role models, my wife, Avani. Bob's been gathering berries for jams and jellies for decades, and he sent me several bottles, which Avani and I have readily devoured. I'm convinced that some of his good vibes make it into every bottle he makes. Anyway, it's always great to get the perspective of folks who've been on the path and the planet just a little bit longer. It's such an important reminder of what's really most important in life. Bob sent me copies of his books, and in each one where he signed them, he wrote a little message. They kind of sum up the philosophy that I'm talking about. One says, remember, life's just a bowl of berries, sweet ones at that. Another reads, may all of your endeavors turn out berry good. And the third says, may your berry bucket be full of joy, love, blessings, and lots of luscious berries. I think Bob, collecting berries along the Bighorn River, has gathered more than just ripe fruits. He's found a lot of what life is really all about. Bob Krumm, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Daniel.
Bob, tell me about these three books you've written. The Falcon Guide, I've got a Pacific Northwest berry book, I've got a Rocky Mountain berry book, and I've got the New England berry book. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to write these books.
Well, I grew up in Michigan with parents who suffered through the Great Depression. And my dad loved to hunt and fish, and my mother was a food hoarder. And anyway, whenever we went fishing, it was not only to supplement the diet, catching fish, particularly bluegills, but also if we did a hike to get to the fishing water in the summertime, my mother would often come along, and we would pick the blackberries or the black raspberries that were along the way. And along towards the fall, pick up elderberries and shagbark hickory nuts and black walnuts. And so, nothing was ever strictly recreation.
You were saying to me just before we got on, you said you're the oldest fishing guide right now on the Bighorn River out there where you are. I want to hear about that. But you saying that, I feel like there's this generation of folks today who it's just so removed from that Great Depression era, the folks that lived through that. So your folks lived through that, and you grew up with their memory of it. And I'd love to just hear a little bit more about how that impacted the food politics of the time, because, today, I think with the recent COVID epidemic, we saw a little bit of food instability, which kind of shook people up, but nothing like what your folks lived through. And just for people listening who aren't familiar, I'd love to hear how that impacted the way folks like that saw food and the importance of having food put away. Because, today people live with 2-3 days worth of food in their house.
Well, number one, we had a large garden. We gardened, and we also raised chickens and sometimes rabbits. And anyway, the chickens provided eggs and meat. I remember many a day coming home from Sunday Mass, and our Sunday dinner was out there walking around in the chicken pen. And anyway, so I, my parents, my mother put up canned an awful lot. And then we had a couple plantings of potatoes and put up. I had cabbage. My mother made sauerkraut, but also you could store cabbage in the root cellar for quite some time. Same with the potatoes and onions. And like I say, my mother canned corn, wax beans, string beans, succotash, lima beans. Anyway, we put up, my mother put up a lot of food, and one of my childhood chores, all the way through high school and so on, was hoeing and weeding the garden, and that was my job, and one of the things my mother we planted, I think, at least 2 plantings of sweet corn, and spaced them maybe a week or 2 apart, so that we'd have about a month's worth of fresh sweet corn. And of course, we canned that, and then after we got a freezer, we froze a lot of sweet corn. So the black walnuts and the hickory nuts we stored, and my mother would make chocolate chip cookies that with the black walnut meats in there, and that was a real treat. Of course, I had to crack the walnuts and take out the walnut meats, but it was things that I now look back on very fondly.
It's funny because those kind of things today are at a hobby level. People do it because they want to have a connection back to the land, but they don't necessarily need to do it for food today. So it's interesting. It's not that far back that these were much more important food sources. Today, a lot of folks like myself, we do it more for fun. But, I'd like to hear about how you got into those black walnuts. They're like notoriously difficult to get into. What was your method for breaking into those?
Had a cinder block and a plain old claw hammer, and hang on to them and crack them open with the hammer.
Pick the pieces out. Yeah. And what were you guys doing with the shagbark hickory nuts?
Again, shagbark. If you've never had hickory nuts, they're, I think, very akin in taste to pecans or pecans, depending on where you're from. And the only trouble is we had a good fox squirrel population in where I lived, and they liked hickory nuts as much as we did, if not more. Of course, when I got older and had a 22, we enjoyed squirrel pie. That was another thing. Back in 30 years or so ago, this animal rights movement came on, and they really deplored hunters and so on. And yet, my dad hunted pheasants and cottontail rabbits and occasionally fox squirrels. And anyway, I followed in his footsteps, and that was just part of harvesting the land. Lots of times those pheasants would have been foraging in our garden come hunting season. So I just considered it another product of the land.
I'm almost like, it's like almost a little jealous hearing stories like that, because like I was saying today, I think for those of us who want to go harvest from the land, it takes a lot of energy to get out there, because it's this thing that we don't have to do anymore, and so we have to like make the time to do it, and I just, it's more leisurely, I guess, but there's something really nostalgic about the story you're telling me here, and
Yeah.
I love, I
Well,
sure love eating squirrels.
well, another thing, and having chickens. Again, one of my youth experiences was having to clean out the chicken coop several times a year. And in the wintertime, I would clean out the chicken coop, and we'd have straw down. And anyway, go in there and clean up, haul out all the soiled straw. And boy, chicken manure that has been sitting around of pretty high ammonia content. But I'd have a wheelbarrow and fill up the wheelbarrow and take it out and dump it on the garden and just leave it as a pile there. And then come springtime, when my dad plowed the garden, before he did, we'd spread out all that chicken manure, and Dad would till it in, and we naturally fertilized our garden that way. And I still do that today here with my little garden here in Sheridan, Wyoming. I still have a friend who raises chickens, and he lets me clean out a chicken coop a couple times a year, and I put it on there. And the same with uh, uh, the folks would rake the lawn in the fall of maple leaves and all the leaves that we had, basswood and sugar maple and silver maple, and we would put that on the garden. And again, that got tilled in along with the chicken manure. So really build up the quality of the garden.
Wow, it's really cool it's just cool to hear that. Tell me about what you guys were doing with the bluegills. You were catching them for food for your family at the time?
Oh, sure. You had to get them, say, probably, about 7-8 inches in length before they were worth keeping. But bring them home and gut them and scale them, and then gut them and fry them up, and they're very good eating. They're one of the best eating fish in the world.
It's funny, right? It's such a small little panfish, but they are just kind of, everybody agrees they're delicious.
Well, they can get up to pretty decent size, and oh about 15-20 years ago, when my uncles were still alive, uh, my uncles still, that was, that, here they are in their 70s or whatever, and their favorite fish to go for was bluegills. And that was the prized fish to catch, and it was just for eating. Yeah.
Yeah. And today, Bob, you still guide fly fishing on the Bighorn River. I'd love to hear how you've seen the fisheries change over the course of your lifetime. And, has it changed for better or for worse, in your opinion?
When I started guiding on the Bighorn in 1985, we would float the river, get out and wade fish, and then go on to the next spot and the next spot. And most of my anglers were very good fly casters, and pretty steeped in the tradition of fly fishing. Nowadays, there's seems though the majority of fishermen that I have seen on the river, and their guides just fish from the boat with uh, strike indicators in everyday parlance, bobbers, and they're fishing nymphs, which are sunken and down there. And the people never get out and wade. They never get out of the boat, and their guide oftentimes will do what I term a roll around, where they'll float a current line down, go to along shore, roll back upstream in the slacker water, and repeat that sequence several times. And the people seem to, again, this is it seems to be the majority of anglers seem to want to be off the river by 5 or 6 in the evening, so they can have their cocktails and so on and so forth. And they're really only concerned about numbers of fish that they catch. And it just reminds me of a story that a tackle shop owner, Mike Craig, once told me about a fellow that came into the Bighorn Angler and said, "I just had a 75 fish day." And Mike said, "Which one was the ugliest? Which one was the most beautiful?" Yeah, and so on. Basically, like I say, people are there is a mindset that just numbers and uh, and that's it, and not really appreciating the beauty of that fish, and that's upsetting to me.
In contrast, tell me what a really perfect day for you looks like. What's the ideal angler you'd like to take out, and what's a really ideal day look like? If you were kind of describing it.
I love to guide anglers that are good fly casters, um, and they're open to not only pursuing the trout, but also to learning more about the stream, the history of the area, the flora and fauna that is around, and just savoring the moment and appreciating everything. Uh, I I have guided people who I remember one day I had two male northern orioles come flying across the river just 15 feet above the water, and they're fighting one another as they're flying by, and they flew by within 20, 30 feet of the boat. And I said to my angler, look at the orioles. And he looks up for 2 seconds. He says, "Yeah, and goes back to watching the strike indicator. And that is, whereas I guide people. I guide a group of fellows that want to stay out till dark, and so they tell me, "Don't come and pick us up till 10." And but we'll stay out until dark. There's a couple of spots I like to fish the evening hatch, and we wait for the fish to start rising, and we can hear, like the pheasants crowing and the Canada geese a honking away. Or in the springtime, there's the chorus frogs and the sandhill cranes and so on. And all the wonderful vocalizations in the evenings, and lots of times with the as the evening comes on, the humidity increases, and the odors in the air, and maybe a good sunset that just really paints up the sky. But and the fish start rising, but as we're sitting there waiting, we end up telling uh, fishing tales and just really relishing the moment and enjoying it. And anyway, that's kind of my ideal day, as somebody that really appreciates the moment.
You have such a beautiful and positive energy and outlook, Bob. And I hate to keep, I don't want to ask these questions that seem negative, but I am curious, like what you've seen, what's going on with people, what's changed that people have gotten away from a focus on how beautiful the creation is and taking all that in and gotten focused on things just like numbers. Like what do you think's going on psychologically with the world that this is how people have the where the focus has gone, you know?
Oh, I think for the most part, um, that most people that can afford a guided fishing trip and so on are in high pressure environments. And that they're working 5-6 days a week, and have a commute and so on and so forth, and it's rush rush rush. You got to produce, and succeed and succeed. And they don't again, this is a real generalization, but they don't really know how to relax and let that all go, and take in, like I say, the moment, each moment of of that day, whether it's a beautiful landscape, or a beautiful trout, whether it's the great blue heron that's fishing off to the side of the river, or an osprey making a dive, uh, or I, I oftentimes will, uh, at lunchtime or so on, when we get out to have lunch, I'll show the people some of the wildflowers that are growing there. And some people aren't interested in that, and others really appreciate that. But I think it's just the high pressure environment that people don't know how to unwind when they go on vacation.
And then tell me about getting involved in, how you became involved with berries. I'm curious, like, if picking berries is part of what you've done with clients over the years. I mean, 3 books on it, I get the impression you know how to savor the sweetness in life, because a person who appreciates berries usually appreciates what's sweet about life. I noticed that, with the people who love them. But is this something you've integrated with your clients, and how did it come to be that you wrote these books? We'll get right back to the show in a moment, but first, right now I'm wearing my new WildFed hoodie. We really took our time choosing these hoodie blanks before we had them printed. They've got a charcoal body and an olive green hood and sleeves, and they've got our Food Is All Around You logo on the front with a really cool foraging basket, fishing rod, and suppressed rifle on the back with the text "Hunt, Forage, Fish." These are super soft and comfortable, look great, and work well in the field or in town. I really love the thickness too. They're fairly light and perfect for the spring days and summer nights ahead. Right now, they're 10% off with the coupon code HFF10 at wild-fed.com. Show your love for WildFed and the wild food lifestyle. Head over to wild-fed.com and use the coupon code HFF10, that's shorthand for Hunt, Forage, Fish 10, for 10% off your new favorite hoodie. Now, back to the show.
I got my initial inspiration to write the book when I was asked to be a fly fishing instructor at the LL Bean Fly Fishing School in Freeport, Maine. The head instructor was a real one of the pillars of fly fishing, Dave Whitlock. And he and I had become friends earlier. But anyway, he had asked LL Bean to uh, recruit me, and I was recruited. Well, while I was there, I met a woman, and we became fast friends, and we went on walks together. And I would point out, well, there were blueberries there on the walk, and there were some blackberries, and lo and behold, one day I saw some elderberries, and I told this woman, Dot, I told Dot, when I was young, we in oh late September, October, we would go out and pick elderberries, and we'd snip off those cymes and put them in a big old paper bag, and then come home and then pull all the berries off, and mom would make jelly out of them, or sometimes pie. And and I had embellished on some of our berry picking expeditions. And Dot said to me, "You ought to write a book." And I poo-pooed the idea, and she kept bugging me, and I and I thought, oh well, what the heck. And hence the first berry book was the New England Berry Book. I think it came out in 91.
And then when did you go on to do the other two books? Because you're covering a pretty broad swath of the country here. You got the Rocky Mountains, the Pacific Northwest, and New England, which is
Well,
pretty impressive for somebody who's not a botanist by profession.
well, I am more of a biologist than in my education. I've had quite a broad swath of that, but uh, anyway, I wanted to point out that I said there's actually four berry books: New England, Great Lakes, Rocky
Oh,
Mountain, and Pacific Northwest. The Great Lakes one is no longer in print,
okay,
but
got it.
and of course, Great Lakes was right down my alley because that's where I grew up. But when I was in high school and so on, uh, I for some reason I really enjoyed picking wild berries, and it was something I could excel in, and particularly around where I grew up in Eaton Rapids, Michigan, which was along the Grand River and its ancient floodplain and so on. The black raspberries were very prolific, and the most choice ones were down in the elm uh, woods in these bottomlands along the Grand River, where they would get just enough sunlight that they could grow and prosper, and then the black raspberries would get oh as big as nickels, thimble nickels. I could go out and fill a 2-gallon bucket full of black raspberries
Mm.
in an hour or two, and knowing where they were, uh, it, that you know being able to identify where they were, where they were living, uh, uh, and growing and prospering, uh, uh, became kind of a pseudoscience for me.
We spoke recently, and you were telling me that sometimes you'd be out on the river with a client, and you'd end up harvesting berries with them, and you talked about even cooking those berries or doing things with those berries right in the field. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit of kind of things you might do before you even get back to a kitchen, things you can do with berries while you're out in the field when you come across some ripe ones.
One of my favorite on-stream treats is Gooseberry Slump or Gooseberry Dumplings. And I have made this gooseberry dumpling recipe several times out there on the river. And the only thing it takes is time, time to pick the berries, times to prepare them. One time I had clients that helped me get a big bunch of gooseberries, and I went in that evening and made gooseberry pie, and we had that for lunch the next day. And anyway.
Can you tell us your slump recipe or your dumpling recipe you were talking about?
Oh boy. Well, this is off the top of my head, so
roughly speaking.
Second the memory goes, and I'll be darned if I can remember what went first. But anyway, it takes 2 cups of gooseberries, and I believe it's a cup and a half of water, 3/4 a cup of sugar, and you put that in a pot and bring it to a boil, and then simmer it for 10 minutes. When it's simmering, I think it's a cup and a half of biscuit mix, a cup of milk, or it might be less, it might be more, and nutmeg. When that things have simmered for 10 minutes, you take and drop, these are drop biscuits, and just drop them on top of that simmering mix and let it go uncovered for 10 minutes, and then cover it for another 10 minutes and take it off and serve it. And it's in the Rocky Mountain Berry book, and I really recommend it. The trouble is with gooseberries in New England, the white pine blister rust is intermediate host as any member of the current family, and of course, gooseberries are in that genus Ribes, which all your currants are. So there's been concentrated efforts on eliminating all currant species in New England, and I think that even in Michigan it was tried. But anyway,
In an effort to try to protect the host species, the pine, they intentionally were eradicating members of the current family up here.
Yeah. Yes.
Wow, I've never heard that, actually. I didn't know, but I don't see many currants around or many gooseberries around.
Well, that's why.
Hey, tell me about, a lot of folks are familiar with raspberries, strawberries, those kind of more common ones. What are some of the berry species that to you are maybe more interesting, but that not many people know about, or people are surprised about when they first encounter?
Well, I noticed you had an article posted about choke cherries.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing of it is, they grew where I grew up in Michigan, and we never picked them, nor the black cherry that is commonly the tree is commonly harvested for fine furniture. But I would say those two, wild grape and choke cherry, are often overlooked in New England and the Great Lakes. Well, I was surprised in New England how common cranberry was,
Yeah.
and yet how hard it is to find. And it's not because that it's really rare or anything else, but it's not very noticeable.
It's a good point because we go out every year for them. I always think of them like it's like trying to find Easter eggs, nestled down in that moss. But a lot of folks will get really excited and they'll say, "Oh my God, I didn't know you could harvest cranberries like this wild." They know the blueberries, they know the raspberries, but you're right. A lot of people aren't aware that they're out there and they are so delicious.
Yeah, yeah. Uh,
I noticed you have written about serviceberry, which in some parts of the country, especially Canada, you hear get called Saskatoons. Out here, we call them shadbush. But
yeah.
that genus Amelanchier, wow, is that to me that is like one of the most underappreciated fruits on the landscape. I mean, the flavor is just to me always makes the blueberry seem a little boring, even.
Well, the service berries, shadbush. Let's see, a couple other common names for them, but
Juneberry, I sometimes hear.
Juneberry, yeah, and basically because they do ripen in late June. They're widespread across North America, at least the northern tier of states, and uh, they're very tasty. The thing of it is, around here, um, the cedar waxwings, the red-winged blackbirds, the robins, and so on, always seem to beat me to my serviceberry bushes. And what I find kind of comical out here is, a good huckleberry patch is a family secret. You do not divulge where you pick your huckleberries. And anybody that mentions service berries or sarvis berries, uh, you know, they go, "Oh, gal, why would you bother with them?" Well, a they're quite widespread, and b they taste delicious, and they make a great pie and a very mild tasting jelly. I think I'd stick with the pies, but anyway, service berries are very tasty.
The wild plum jam you sent over to me was just awesome. My wife and I ate that, little jar in a day and a half, which is probably not the healthiest way to consume jams, but it was just so good. That's not a fruit that I get to work with out here very often. So I was wondering if you could say a little bit about that because it's something I'm not real familiar with.
Well, wild plums again are quite common in the Rocky Mountain West. They go over all the way over into the Dakotas, and I remember um, reading a book about the Lewis and Clark expedition, and they started up the Missouri River in September. And I don't know how far up, but they had gotten into the Dakota Territory and had stopped. And the men had gone out and they discovered wild plums. And here's men. I can't remember how many kilocalories these men needed each day, but these plums were like ambrosia. They did. The men were
Yeah.
just gorging on wild plums, and uh, Lewis just really waxed eloquent on describing, what a wonderful, wonderful fruit they had found, and what a blessing it was, and so on and so forth. But wild plums, as I say, they're quite common. It's one of those wild fruits that very hit and miss each year, in that they usually blossom in early May, and often we have late frosts, late freezes, and that can take care of that year's plum crop right then and there. Another thing, if we're having a wet spring, I mean, where we're getting a couple of inches of rain a week, or, and it's just soggy, the plums blossom and set fruit, but a fungus happens to the young growing plums, and they just expand to about almost ping pong ball size, and turn black and fall off, and that can really take care of it. And then too, a drought can really the plums will usually go ahead and produce, but the size of the plums are just so small that it's basically a pit with a rind. So that maybe 1 out of 4 years, it just all of a sudden there are. I recall seeing these draws that had a little creek going through them, and looking, and they're just pink for as far as I can see. And I have told people that in a year like that, I could fill a pickup bed full of wild plums.
All right, you got to tell me the next time there's a year like that, because I'm coming out for a visit, because I would love to experience that.
Yeah, what I did, the plum jam I sent you, I think there was a November or December 21 date on it. And what I do is I'll take those plums, put them in a gallon Ziploc bag, and put them in the freezer until it's no fun making jam and jelly when it's 90 degrees out, and anyway. So I usually wait for a nice cold day and yank them out of the freezer and thaw them out and have at it. Or I have a steamer that if I want to make jelly and syrup, plum jelly and plum syrup, I'll put a gallon in that steamer and render them out, usually 6-8 hours, and take that juice and again make jelly, but wait for a cold day.
Yeah, another one you write about that I wanted to bring up, because I think it's one that I'll mention to folks, and very few people I'll tell about it have ever tried it, and I get so excited to get to pick them with people, is thimbleberry. I just think it's got such a unique, this kind of strawberry, kiwi-ish kind of flavor, but a really unique member of the raspberry family. So yeah, tell me a little bit about that one.
Well, thimbleberries again are widespread across the northern United States and into Canada. They grow in good, rich soil, and the species name is Rubus parviflora, and they have a big, beautiful blossom, and the berry itself again is about nickel sized, but there's per plant there's only you might only find 3 or 4, and and you have to come into a heck of a thimbleberry patch to have anything to do with them, and usually the best thing to do with them is eat them as you go.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, Bob, you told me that you're 78 right now, I think you said, and you're still out there guiding, having this conversation with you. It's like you're sharp. Like, do you feel that eating all these berries over your lifetimes played a role in that? Because now they tell us that the berries and all the antioxidants, right? They're like an anti-aging food. Curious if you think what your perspective on berries for health is.
I think berries are healthy, no doubt about it. And, you know, the ones that I've harvested, in the wild and so on, aren't going to be contaminated with various chemicals and so on. But I think having, wanting to go out there and pick them and, and expend energy to go out and get them, I think staying active is uh, is critical.
Yeah.
That a person needs to get out and be active. I don't know that you need to have a gym membership. I have never belonged to a gym or whatever, but to get out and walk a lot if you can. Boy, oftentimes when I go after wild berries, I cover a lot of ground. But there's something just to be said to eat something that has uh, grown naturally and without fertilizers or anything else. It's just a product of the land. You really can't go wrong with something like that.
Yeah, I agree so much. What do you think thanks for sharing that. What's your hope for these books you've written? Like what do you hope they inspire for people who come across them?
Well, I would just hope that they get out and and it gives them an excuse to go out and look for them. Initially, when I wrote the book, I also showed how the various plants, uh, the various shrubs looked in under winter conditions, so that if a person was out and about cross country skiing or snowshoeing or walking the dogs or whatever, that they could recognize what it looked like in winter conditions. But that's no longer in the format. But sometimes it's just neat to see the plant when it's blossoming. Wild plums and choke cherries blossom at about the same time, and oftentimes pretty much the same habitat. And boy, I've seen draws that are just look like somebody came in and hung a, uh, a tapestry of just of white on down the valley, and it's they can, it's just something to behold. I would hope that people would get out uh, and pursue these berries and appreciate them for what they are and enjoy a natural treat.
And then in closing, as someone who's spent a lifetime in the outdoors, just curious what your sort of concluding little bit of wisdom is for everybody who's listening. You got a lot of people who've got a passion for being outside, who've got a passion for wild foods. But what is kind of you? How do you sum up sort of? What's your sort of summation on everything? Give us your little bit of fortune cookie wisdom, if you would.
Every morning, I give thanks to God for the beauty of this world, and and I hope that it when a person is out and about, to really appreciate the moment and to appreciate all the beauty that's around you. I think, you know, that so often we fail to appreciate that. Uh, and I I remember from Mitch Albom's book Tuesdays with Maury, how this professor was slowly but surely dying from, I believe it was Parkinson's, but he was absolutely he marveled at a leaf, and and the life that was in that leaf, and sometimes that just to just to really marvel at life in general is is quite a takeaway.
Bob, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for your books and the contribution you've made to the foraging world and all you've done in the world of fishing. And just want to say thank you for coming on today and sharing with us. I really appreciate this conversation. And of course, really appreciate the plum jelly as well. So thank you.
Well, Daniel, thank you for having me on the air. I really enjoyed visiting with you.
Thanks for listening to the WildFed podcast. Help us grow this show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh new content. Have a question you'd like answered on the show, or a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host us on? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. If you still haven't seen season 1 of the WildFed TV show, you can go to myoutdoortv.com, grab yourself a free trial subscription, and then check out all 10 episodes. Season 2 of WildFed premieres on Outdoor Channel in early 2022. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out our store for WildFed hats, stickers, and more. WildFed. Food is all around you.